We're on, we're live. Welcome to the Recruiter Startup Podcast. I'm joined with David Wolfingstein. What a cool surname. Wish I was called Wolfingstein.
I wish it was pronounced like it's Wolstenholme.
Wolstenholme. Where
Yeah,
is that
yeah.
name from?
Well, it sounds distinctly German, but it's actually a really old English name. But I have to repeat it about 30 times a day because no one can pronounce it or understand it. But yeah, I don't talk. I don't talk to my parents anymore because of it.
Yeah, I don't talk to mine because of my first name. So we could be a mixture of the worst of two worlds there. So talking to you from Sydney, um, got you on today. Want to take your temperature on the Australian market, what you're seeing down there, um, and to talk about changing landscape of recruitment and how media branding and that side of it is becoming more important. So, um, how is the Australian market? For anybody listening, it is May the 20th, week 8 of COVID.
I'm on May the 21st, but different days.
21st.
Yeah. That's what this thing's doing to us. It's a question. It's a good question. It depends. It depends on lots of different factors. It depends on your sector. It depends on how the business that you're running is it running efficiently. It depends how experienced you are as a recruiter. There's lots and lots of variables. But the industry's been hit hard. But I'm going to be pretty vocal and talk about pre-COVID as well, because I'd seen that a lot of businesses weren't doing as well as they would like to have told the world, and that was because the economy wasn't as strong, the businesses weren't as run as well as possible. So, as I say to other people, it kind of fell off a cliff a little bit with such a horrendous thing like COVID.
Hmm. Yeah, I noticed a dip in Australia. I also noticed that salaries hadn't really increased in about in the last 5 or 6 years, um, and I was just curious, like what which sectors now or which sectors before COVID were starting to decline a little bit.
So your standard perhaps like accounting, professional services, construction, depending on what you was working on, was getting a bit um, edgy as well. Yeah, mainly the general services, business support, they weren't running as effectively as possible. Specialisms, depending on that market, depending on the economy, depending on the political situation. But it seems to be a global thing that the technology companies and the um, healthcare companies were tending to do fine, and they're obviously surviving very well now. Most of them.
Hmm. Um, so in this time in COVID, what how has that affected your own business?
Well, 7 or 8 weeks ago, I was almost started crying because I run events, so I run workshops, and I've been partnering with the RCSA, and obviously that was the end of that face-to-face all-day workshops and private workshops with clients. And I was just kind of scratching my head thinking, what the bloody hell is going to happen here? I'm selling recruitment, training, development, and events to an industry that's been hit harder than any other industry. So I'm amazed at what's happening with my business. There's just this phenomenal turnaround in terms of level of interest. People are engaging my services because for different reasons. It seems to be that I was flavour of the month with mid-tier companies where they had money to spend. They had training and development high on their radar. They noticed their gaps. They were prepared to invest in people and external parties as well. Whereas there's this huge shift. My business has completely pivoted without me pivoting, which sounds bonkers. And all of a sudden, it's the small business owners, very, very small, that historically never spent any money on this area for different reasons. They now have more time on their hands. They recognise it's a skill set or an area that they need to develop. And they've generally not 20 years old, they're more 30s and 40s. And so they've got a few dollars in the bank and they're prepared to spend while they may not necessarily be making a lot of money at the moment. So, yeah, it's ridiculous how many inquiries I'm getting. And I'm also getting an awful lot of inquiries from people who've just decided to set up. Less because of the reason that they've been made redundant, and more because they just felt this was their time, or they're about to set up right now. So there's this huge shift going on in Australia, which is exciting and interesting. How long that will last for, I'm not so sure, but we'll see.
I always feel Australia, when it comes to business and recruitment, is always, it feels like it's 10 years behind a lot of other marketplaces. They like to do regional specific recruitment. They like to do lots of face-to-face. It works a little slower, very matey, relationship driven. I find it a very different marketplace to the ones that we work. Are they now moving into, do you see a massive growth in people now taking the risk and becoming independent recruiters, or as opposed to being more career recruiters like they were?
Massive variables. The first thing is that I think people are really, there's a few questions you're asking there, but the one where what's changing, I think, is got to be that people who are setting up less because they've been made redundant or fear. It's more because they've realised that they can do this on their own. They're not necessarily getting the support or this unbelievable brand that they're representing, and they're not getting training and development, and they're not getting their needs met. And maybe they are thinking about having children and don't want to be commuting, and they back themselves and they've got enough clients. So in answer to your question, yes, that's shifting. You will see more and more people setting up. I think it's a different mindset as well. People who were setting up years ago wanted to set up and grow a big agency. I think you'll see more and more now that people will be setting up and wanting to stay a one-man band.
And America is quite prevalent in that space, as you'll know from the recruiter groups. They do a lot of that there. The UK is probably a little more like Australia, although the market's so much bigger. So let's talk personal branding. Is there science behind it? Is there a process? What do you teach people?
I'm less about just doing stuff, because I think with anything you need a plan, strategy, and once you do anything in life, whether that be marketing, saving money, whatever, getting fit, if you've got some structure around it, you tend to achieve those goals. And so if you look at branding from an online or marketing perspective, most recruiters fall over because they want short wins, and it's a long game. And so the way that I help people is that I get them to really understand their brand. And there's two facets to that. There's a brand that is built up of their personality, so their values, their beliefs, their why, how they make people feel. And then there's a second part of that, which is crucially important. And that's actually understanding in the marketplace what that reputation is. Because reputation is everything, as you know, in recruitment. And so I've got to help them define their brand from an internal perspective. And then I've got to understand from an external perspective, does that marry up? What differentiates them? What outcomes do they deliver? And then we can develop marketing that drives that message out to the marketplace.
What's the process for the first bit?
What do you mean? The first bit of understanding? Just discovery. So asking lots of questions. I use certain methodologies to help people uncover their values. If you ask most recruiter, why do you do what they do? Most can't really answer that. It's either this is how I do it, or this is what I do, but not why I do what I do. And they don't really know what differentiates them. Even the good ones struggle with that as well. So we've got to try and get that out of them. We've got to understand their psyche and them as a human being as well, not just as a recruiter. Because as you know, there's this obsession with authenticity. And everyone struggles with that. And until you know who you are, then you'll continue to struggle with authenticity. And I can barely say it. Then it becomes a lot easier to then put yourself out to the world, so to speak.
Yeah, the authenticity thing's nice. I always find it funny seeing that this is my first ever LinkedIn profile or LinkedIn video. I would like to talk about this, and like, geez, just talk normally. How do you get people to be more confident and to put themselves out there? What are the key things that are kind of like making them not do that?
Well, the first thing is knowing your brand. I'm going to keep coming back to that. I know it sounds boring, but if you know, number one, you know your own brand, but also you know your target audience. So what are their needs, wants, and desires, and how can you communicate in an effective way? And so, it's always going to be challenging, whatever you do. If you write, it's daunting. If you do video, it's daunting. But if you've got a message and it's going to engage with your target audience, it's going to be easier. And a lot of those people who come onto LinkedIn and buzz around and create shit videos, quite often it's because they just don't know how to create value to their target audience. So they just bumble on about nothing.
Yeah, they're not thinking, what does this person want to know? What's gonna trigger them? I always try and put myself where I was at Robert Walters 3 years in and what I was thinking about. And that's the person I try and communicate to.
I know, and it's fundamental marketing, and you will know this, but until you've sat down and actually looked at the psychology of your buyer persona, so your ideal client or candidate or employee, and you understand their motivators, their drivers, their behaviors, their demographic, then you can start communicating to them. And it doesn't even have to be all about recruitment. It can be about lots of different things.
Sure.
And I've said this on webinars and podcasts quite a lot of lately. The reason why recruitment is so popular is because most people in businesses hate doing it. They're not good at it. They don't want to talk about recruitment too much. It's a necessary evil. So they don't want to hear all day long about your recruitment stories. So you've got an opportunity to actually talk about other things that are important to them, not just about hiring people, which is obviously important to them, but it's not their be end and all. They certainly don't enjoy doing it, most people.
Do you have like a step-by-step process that you get people to follow?
A lot of my work's done via a program. So it's called BUILD. It's an acronym. And so the B is brand review. So that's where I audit everything I can find out about you online. And then we look at your competitors in the marketplace. Well, this can help with positioning. It can help with messaging. We can look at their content, their engagement. And there's that discovery piece, which is kind of a lot of homework on their part and a bit of homework on my part, but it's getting to the crux of your brand. And then the third step in my process is interviews. So I actually go out and interview people that are going to be able to tell me the good, the bad, and the ugly. And that helps with messaging and understanding what content they want. And also a large part of what I do is, if you've got a personal brand, you obviously want to keep evolving and improving that. And so I want to find out what those gaps are. And the people that you work with are the best people that probably won't tell you that, but they will. So we can address that in online and offline communication as well, and your service offering. The fourth step in the process is language. So I develop your LinkedIn story, the narrative, and also define your value proposition in 25 words or less. And then the last stage in the process is strategic recommendations. So online and offline recommendations that's going to drive your message in the marketplace. Some of that could be specific creative campaigns. And then I coach them and support them to execute that.
Where do people fall down? Where's the bit that you have most challenges getting them from one point to the next?
That's a really good question. Well, the first one is actually looking inwards at themselves.
Yeah,
and that might sound, it's really, really thought-provoking. I ask some very, very personal, very challenging questions to get down into your value system. And that's my, some of my key differentiators. I've got this obsession with living your highest set of values. And most people have never been on a journey to work out what those are. And so I've got to help people get that out of them. And it comes from life experiences, sometimes very traumatic things, sometimes perceptions in their health that they've got that just not popular mainstream stuff. And also as well, it's getting them to think of themselves, well, if they are going to be this person online, what is this voice? And all of a sudden, I think there's a bit of fear because, as you will know, you're very successful at this. You've got to get used to people liking you and people not liking you. And we all have egos, and that can get pretty scary for some people. And I don't want to badge all recruiters into one space, but
I got absolutely hammered for posting a post last week about I think I said something like, it's a surprising and tricky market when people at Hayes are telling you they're happy, and I'm getting slaughtered, right? And like, there's people, Australian recruiters or internal recruiters, or people who've kind of worked for big firms. They get really sensitive and they take it too serious. And because a large part of our network is there from the time we lived there, God, I'm getting hammered. Like, you're a bad person, and I'm like, Jesus, chill out, like. But people at Hayes are messaging me. That's hilarious. Good crack,
Well, yeah, that's the thing. It's about. But whatever you do, I mean, you've got to be consistent. That's the word that's got to keep coming out. And if your voice is consistent about provoking reaction, then fair enough, so be it. But you and I know that will often only take you so far. It's all about creating value.
Yeah.
If you look at all recruiters, they tend to follow Mitch Sullivan and Dan Kelsall. They're both amazing at what they do. Yes, they create reactions, they wind people up. But you know what? Everything in their messaging and their marketing gets you to understand what it is that they can do for you as well.
Yeah.
And so that's where people get it wrong. And I'm just giving 2 examples there because a lot of recruiters will know them. But, they create reactions, they get people talking about them, but ultimately they're also selling what it is that they do so well.
Yeah. You can. So there's a fine line, right? And Mitch definitely rocks that line, but he's around long enough and gives, as you said, enough credibility. Other people, I'm not going to name them, but they're always looking to do the shock thing, and if you're always doing that, you run out of positivity, and you become almost a caricature of yourself. So whenever I find myself a few years ago, almost going down that road a little bit, because I was like, oh, this is kind of working. And then I thought, oh God, I'm not sure I like that person. And then I'm like, so it's kind of finding that balance between what your message is tricky. We've kind of learned it over a long period of time. But at the same stage, I would never be too careful and not crack a joke at the risk of somebody being offended. So it's just balance.
Yeah, I mean, it is balance, but the reality of all of this is that you want to connect with your audience, you want to build a community, and that's what it basically comes down to. And there's nothing worse than being this sort of identity online, and then meeting these people offline, and like, you're absolutely nothing like. You're not congruent, you're not consistent. I bought into that person, and you're not that person. Or, you talk about how much you deliver an amazing candidate service, and then you never call me back. So what you put out online has to show up offline as well.
Yeah. No. A bit that always interests me, David, is the big businesses in Australia. They're so dominant. Like, if the Walters Page, Hayes, Half, and Hudson are 80% of the market, like they're a massive part of that marketplace. Nobody has a personal brand in there. So our big business is missing a trick here in not developing their people's brand, or is the overall corporate brand enough? And how do we balance that as recruitment leaders as we grow businesses? A few different questions in there, but it's a big topic.
Well, the first thing, I think most people have a brand. I don't think the bigger businesses actually give freedom to people to brand themselves up as much as they would like. And I think if you look at a lot of the leaderships teams in the big recruitment companies, they do a lot of that, but they talk about the business brand at the forefront. You don't really get to know the real them. It's almost like they've sucked the Hayes pills or the Michael Page pills, and that's what you get. You don't get this authenticity and uniqueness.
No.
But you and I'm a one-man show. I know that you've got aspirations to grow, but these businesses are billion-dollar businesses, and they're ridiculously successful. And they've got huge resources. They've got a model that phenomenally works well for them. And we keep talking about, will that model die? And the answer is probably no, not in the short term, because they're just good at what they do. Do I buy into their methodology? Do I think that they're missing a trick, really helping people develop their personal brands? Yes, I do. But you know what? I've not got a billion-dollar business. They have. And so,
but what about the people who work? What about the people who work for them? Are they missing a trick, not building their brand in this time? Like, if Gary Vee says brand is all we're going to be left with, if you're at a big corporate and you're under that umbrella, and the day that you go, you haven't built a brand. Your brand was that, but that's now gone. So is that not the risk?
Well, yes, it is. And that's why a lot of people, so even successful recruiters, when they leave those bigger businesses and they ready for their next leap, whether that be to a smaller company, whether that be to send on themselves, they're often like deer in headlights, because then they realize that they've never invested in marketing themselves online. And, they might have a situation where they can't work with those existing clients. And all of a sudden they've got to drum up business. It's like, shit, what am I going to do here?
Yeah.
And that's when they call people like me, or they want to look at how they can develop themselves online. So yeah, it's pretty scary as well, because you and I both know building a community online takes an awful lot of effort, a lot of time, a lot of thinking about things when you're having a dump, and people don't realize until you invest in branding how much time it takes. And it doesn't mean overnight success. It really does take a lot of work, and people need to know that.
What do you see as the future of the industry? Do you see it continuing the same way it is? Do you see it changing? Do you see the way we're working changing?
Well, the first thing is, I'll look at this from a short-term perspective, because there's lots of optimism in the marketplace. Recruiters are optimistic people in the main. But if you look at the UK, I don't know the exact model, but in Australia, the support from the government finishes in September, and I have no idea what that looks like. How is that going to impact all these millions of businesses that they're supporting right now? So I don't want to sound negative, but I have my reservations about how quickly recruitment will bounce back. And if I look at what's going on right now, and I'm seeing this big shift in people setting up themselves, the mid-tiers are really hurting, and the big companies, well, they just keep on doing what they do, and they quietly let go of a lot of people. I do think we're going to see more and more small businesses. And again, I'm not a futurist, but we're all looking at the way that we commuted. We're all looking at spending more time with our family. We're looking at things that are important in our life and how work wraps around that. And I think that will change. And the other thing is, as well, is that, the market's going to change. We all know that contracting is going to be more prevalent. We know that there's going to be less money. We know that internal recruiters might be leaving the industry. So there's all different things going to be happening. And I'm not here to predict, but there's going to be changes. Definitely going to be changes.
Yeah. And you think there's opportunities for the smaller players to build a brand and to take a market share?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think there's a bit of a concern. Good marketing will get you so far, but it all comes back down to how good you are at doing your job. And there's no two ways about that. If you do your job really, really well, and you're always improving and developing, and you get really good at marketing, then you're in absolute dynamite territory.
Where can people find you? How can they get in touch with you?
Well, I walk the streets at night, most nights.
You have a vampire surname, so.
Yeah. You got a vampire haircut. Yeah, I mean, I just live on LinkedIn. You know, that's where I could move on to other channels, but for me, recruiters spend a lot of their time on LinkedIn, and that's where I've built, whether you want to call it a community. But yeah, connect with me on LinkedIn, and I'm very giving of my time. It's not just about winning business. Pre-COVID, I've always been there to help recruiters because I'm so passionate for two reasons. One, the lack of development and training that the industry gives people in a very tough job. And secondly, people need support. They need confidence to get better at this. And I want to be one of those people that helps recruiters. And, for the ones that do it and do it well, and whether they've worked with me or not worked with me, the results can be really remarkable.
All right. Well, look, thanks very much for joining us. Really enjoyed chatting to you. I've been following you for a while. Enjoy interacting. And yeah, reach out to David if you want help with your personal brand.
Thank you very much.